We're making our way through the book of Judges. We're up to chapter 13. We're going to be introducing ourselves to a fella named Samson. Keeping in mind, next week is 2 weeks out is election day. And I hope you're doing your homework, reading those voters' guides, deciding by the issues and making your choice. We're down to Samson, the last named judge, although some feel that Samson, even though he's not part of the book of Judges, is a judge. I'm sorry, I meant to say Samuel. I'll get them backwards 100 times over the next couple months. You watch and see. The vice president, really the president of vice. His life verses, Samson went down. It's in there twice. And then towards the end, when Samson met his failure, the Philistines brought him down. So his life verse, Samson went down. And the people of Israel again did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. So the Lord gave them into the hand of the Philistines for 40 years. Now that sounds like just like all the other episodes that we had gone through, but the times of Samson, notice down below it says, he shall begin to save Israel. You have from Othniel to Ehud to Deborah and Jephthah. They delivered Israel, but Samson only begins to save Israel. And where the concurrency with Samuel is important is at the end of Samson, he's going to kill off several thousand of the leaders of the Philistines, and that weakens them to the point where Samuel can actually start gaining some victories. But I want you to notice the degradation as we go through the books. In the beginning, the Canaanites lived among the Hebrews. Then in the same chapter, the Hebrews, and this verse repeats itself across various tribes, the Hebrews live among the Canaanites. Now we see that the foreigners they're not just living among the Hebrews, they're oppressing the Hebrews. And now we see that the Philistines ruled over the Hebrews, ruled over Israel. So the birth of Samson. Now, Samson means awesome or as brilliant as the sun, as opposed to Samuel, which means asked of the Lord. And the people of Israel again did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. So the Lord gave them into the hand of the Philistines for 40 years. And there was a certain man of Zorah, of the tribe of the Danites, whose name was Manoah. And we're going to spend the first portion of the study talking about the parents before we get into Samson himself. Now, Manoah is the dad. And I want you to notice his name is Rest. He found rest even in a place of hornets. And we're going to find out the notion of that, not the insect itself, but the places like a hive of hornets. And we're going to pop up a map a little bit and you're going to see. And of course, the word Dan means judgment. And from chapter 13 all the way to chapter 21, we're going to read about the tribe of judgment. There's an interesting map. And you see Zorah, that was Samson's hometown. And you look over towards the right and you see Eshtaol. Some of those Eshtaol and Mahanaim were not on this particular map, so I had to add them. So the distance from Eshtaol to Zorah is only 2 miles. The distance from Zorah to Timnah is only 5 miles. So this is a very tight piece of geography. He was raised in Zorah, and you see Eshtaol over to the right. In the middle, Eshtaol to Zorah is only 2 miles. In the middle is Mahanaim, the camp of Dan. That's where the Spirit of the Lord came upon Samson, and that's where he was buried. His beginning and his end. His beginning was Zorah, a place of hornets, and his ending was from a strong woman. Eshtaol means strong woman. We're going to see his escapade. He's going to start by going to Timnah, which means forbidden. He was forbidden to go there, but he went there twice. He went there the first time to see a woman, and you see that word see or saw or look, and it's going to become an important word. He went to the first time to the forbidden place to see a woman, and he went to the second time to the forbidden place to take the woman. And we're going to go through the riddle and everything, and he's going to end up down to Ashkelon, which is not on this map, which means, I should have said Ashkelon up in the top lozenge, which means theft. He went down there to steal the garments of 30 people to pay off the riddle. But we're going to get to that. And his wife was barren and had no children. I said we're going to concentrate on the parents first. Manoah had the right to divorce his wife because she was barren. He didn't do that. He stuck with her. Okay? Again, we're going to see how Samson had great parents. And then I'm going to tell you, in parenting, grandparenting, actual mileage may vary. You know, the Bible says, train up a child in the way he is old, in the way he should go, and when he is old, he should not depart from it. That's not a fact. That's a principle. Just like the Bible says we have 70 years. We're not guaranteed 70 years. So let's get into the study. Therefore, be careful and drink no wine or strong drink, and eat nothing unclean, for behold, you shall conceive and bear a son. We're going to come back and have a principle on verses 4 and 5. No razor shall come upon his head, for the child shall be a Nazarite to God from the womb, and he shall begin to save Israel from the hand of the Philistines. Now, a Nazarite, that's all spelled out in Numbers chapter 6, and he should have no strong drink, not even eat grapes or raisins. He should not get his hair cut until the vow is done. The vow is typically for a period of time, and at the end of the period of time, you shave your head and you go to the temple or the tabernacle at the time. But for Samson, he was to be a Nazarite all his life. And the third bullet was no dead bodies. Now, it's unclear when you read that passage if it meant no human dead bodies or any dead bodies. I'm going to take it to mean no human dead bodies, because if it was no other dead bodies, you'd have to be a vegetarian. Doesn't say anything like that. Then the woman came and told her husband, a man of God came to me, and his appearance was like the appearance of the angel of God. Very awesome. I did not ask him where he was from, and he did not tell me his name. Then the man prayed to the Lord and said, O Lord, please let the man of God whom you sent come again and teach us what we are to do with the child you will be given. Again, I want to underscore Manoah. He was a righteous man. He was praying for his children before they came. And God listened to the voice of Manoah, and the angel of God came again to the woman as she sat in the field. But Manoah, her husband, was not with her. So the woman ran quickly and told her husband, behold, the man who came to me the other day has appeared to me. And Manoah rose and went after his wife and came to the man and said, are you the man who spoke to this woman? And he said, I am. And Manoah said, now, when your words come true, what is to be the child's manner of life, and what is his mission? I know as a parent and as a grandparent, I wonder the same thing. What's going to happen to our kids? He's a godly man. And the angel of the Lord said to Manoah, of all that I said to the woman, let her be careful. Keep in mind, he is answering the question, what shall we do with the child once it's born? The angel already said, take care of yourself before the child's born. And now he's saying, take care of yourself after the child is born. So some lessons learned for parents to be, and grandparents. Number one, pray. I just had last weekend a grandson married. And there were so many prayers about the children. You would think that the motivation of all the people around the couple are grandchildren. But no, it's a principle to be praying even before conception for those kids. Number two, take care of yourself. And then number three, lead by example. So there's Manoah, led by example. And then you see, of course, actual mileage may vary. Manoah said to the angel of the Lord, please let us detain you and prepare a young goat for you. And the angel of the Lord said to Manoah, if you detain me, I will not eat of your food. But if you prepare a burnt offering, then offer it to the Lord. For Manoah did not know that he was the angel of the Lord. I'm convinced this is another theophany, a physical pre-incarnate appearance of Jesus Christ. And Manoah said to the child of the Lord, to the angel of the Lord, what is your name, so that when your words do come true, we may honor you? And the angel of the Lord said to him, why do you ask my name, seeing it is wonderful? Now, that could mean either his name is quote unquote wonderful, or it could mean that wonderful is an attribute to his name. But I want you to look at this verse, Isaiah 9:6. Now, I use the King James because that has a comma there under the word wonderful. Modern translations simply say wonderful counselor and then go on. Keep in mind, in Hebrew, there are no commas. There aren't even any vowels. So you can decide whether he's the wonderful counselor or wonderful counselor. But think about that as we finish this particular segment. So Manoah took the young goat with the grain offering and offered it on the rock to the Lord, to the one who works wonders. That's his name, the one who works wonders. And Manoah and his wife were watching. And when the flame went up toward the heaven from the altar, the angel of the Lord went up in the flame of the altar. Now Manoah and his wife were watching, and they fell on their faces to the ground. The angel of the Lord appeared no more to Manoah and to his wife. Then Manoah knew that he was the angel of the Lord. He didn't realize it while the angel was there. It was only afterwards. You know, I'm like that. I get things later. And maybe you are too. I don't know. And Manoah said to his wife, we shall surely die, for we have seen God. Now, Manoah is reacting here. And the wife, she seems to be, first of all, keep in mind that the angel of the Lord came to her, not to him. She might be the more spiritual of the two. We don't know. That doesn't mean he shouldn't be the spiritual leader of the family. And Manoah said to his wife, we shall surely die. And she says, but his wife said to him, if the Lord had meant to kill us, he would not have accepted a burnt offering and a grain offering at our hands. After all, she was going to bear a child, right? So they're going to be allowed to live. And the woman bore a son and called his name Samson, awesome, like the sun. And the young man grew, and the Lord blessed him. And the Spirit of the Lord began to stir him at the camp of Dan between Zorah and Eshtaol. Somewhere in that 2-mile stretch between those two villages, there was this place called Mahanadad. Now, I want you to notice that phrase, the Lord blessed him. The blessings that occur in the book of Judges, first of all, Caleb blessed his daughter Oxa. Deborah blessed Jael. But Samson is the only one mentioned in the book of Judges that the Lord blessed. The Lord blessed him. Nevertheless, his life is a tragedy. And that brings us to chapter 14, Samson's marriage. Samson went down to Timnath, the forbidden place. He went down first in chapter 14, and he saw a woman. He goes down in chapter 15 to have the woman. So Samson went down to Timnah, and at Timnah, he saw one of the daughters of the Philistines. That word saw is going to become important. Then he came up and told his father and mother, I saw one of the Philistines at Timnah. Now get her for me as my wife. Now that doesn't show much respect for mom or dad. There was no negotiation, no pleas, no question mark at the end. Go get her for me. But the father and mother said to him, is there not a woman among the daughters of your relatives or among all your people that you must go to take a wife from the uncircumcised Philistines? Parents, grandparents, we should be asking, can't you find a Christian boy? Can't you find a Christian girl? Well, Dad, we're only going to the movies. I can recall when my oldest ones were going through high school, their principal would say, a date is a potential mate. And so, can't you find a Christian? Everything else becomes a second criterion. But Samson said to his father, get her for me, for she is right in my eyes, literally pleasing to the eye. Now, 1 John tells us about three things, all that is in the world: the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. Now you see, well, there's lust of the eyes sitting there. That's not first, that's second. And I'm going to put those lines on there, okay? If you read the Gospel of Matthew, and it talks about the temptation of Christ, and you read the Gospel of Luke, same parallel scriptures, they're in different sequencing, okay? And people behave different ways. Some person will have something go through their eye gate, the lust of the eyes, and then it drives the lust of the flesh. Other people, I'll take a grand example, would be pornography. Other people would search for it because they have a lust of the flesh, and then it's gratified through the lust of the eyes. Gratified might have been the wrong word. I might say escalated. And we're going to see, and you can study this out different ways. I think Samson is maturing, and when it finally came to Delilah, he was dealing with the pride of life, not necessarily the first two. I'm going to put out the hypothesis, and you guys can decide for yourselves. If you happen to have a problem with numbers 1 and 2, particularly, look at Hebrews. Let us lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely. King James says the sin that so easily besets us. It's the sin that hangs. Sometimes I call it my Achilles heel, which is my anger and my impatience. Somebody else, it might be the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes. So what's the answer if it's your eyes in particular? Look to Jesus. And here's what Job said: I've made a covenant with my eyes. How then could I gaze at a virgin? NIV says it better: look lustfully at a young woman. And King James goes even deeper than that. Not just look, but think about it. Two great verses if that happens to be the sin that easily besets you. His father and his mother didn't know that it was from the Lord, for he was seeking an opportunity against the Philistines. And at that time, the Philistines ruled over Israel. Then Samson went down with his father and mother, and they came to the vineyards of Timnah. Keep in mind, Samson is a Nazirite. He's got no business going to the vineyards, and the mother was told to keep that wine and strong drink vow. And so they both go down to Timnah. And what we're going to see when they finally go back to consummate the marriage, only dad goes down. Does that mean mom is not blessing the marriage, so she's not going to the wedding? Does that mean mom realizes that that's a place that's forbidden, Timnah, and so she doesn't go there? We don't know. Take it for what it's worth. And behold, a young lion came toward him roaring, and then the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him. And although he had nothing in his hand, he tore the lion in pieces as one tears a young goat. But he did not tell his father or his mother what he had done. The second command that was given to, notice, Mrs. Manoah, her name isn't even given. The second command was to not eat anything unclean. And so the honey's a problem, but Samson didn't tell her that the honey was a problem. And then he went down and talked with the woman, and she was right in Samson's eyes. Again, pleasing in her eyes. All at once he follows her as an ox goes to the slaughter. At some point, the thinking clicks off, and it's the lust of the flesh that takes over, just like an ox going to slaughter. And after some days, he returned to take her, and he turned aside to see the carcass of the lion. So we've seen so far that he's seeing a woman. Now we're going to see where he sees the honey. And Samson's problem is he's looking horizontally as opposed to vertically, and he's looking for something that's going to please him. That's where the whole Samson mindset is. And behold, there was a swarm of bees in the body of the lion and honey, and he scraped it out into his hands. He didn't just go in there and grab some honeycomb and get busy, which would have been fine, I suppose, if he could do it without the dead body thing, but he scraped it out. Sounds pretty disgusting, but I'll tell you, as a beekeeper, honey creates hydrogen peroxide. So it was clean from that. It's unclean from Jewish law, but clean in terms of hygiene. And he came to his father and mother and gave them some, and they ate, but he did not tell them that he had scraped the honey from the carcass of the lion. The father went down to the woman. Okay, notice mom stayed home. The father went down to Timnah, and Samson prepared a feast. So what kind of a feast did he prepare? He prepared the kind that the Philistines would have. So the young men used to do. So what kind of feast was it? You look up that word, and it was a drinking party. Here's the Nazirite who sets up a drinking party. As soon as the people saw him, they brought 30 companions to be with him. The Bible doesn't say that Samson went down to Timnah with his dad and his buddies. He went down with his dad, period. And so they fill the wedding hall, if you will, with quote unquote friends, companions. And Samson said to them, "Let me now put a riddle to you. If you can tell me what it is within the 7 days of the feast and find it out, then I'll give you 30 linen garments and 30 changes of clothes," which were big bucks back then. "But if you cannot tell me what it is, then you will give me the 30 linen garments and the 30 changes of clothes." And they said to him, "Put your riddle that we may hear it." And he said to them, "Out of the eater comes something to eat. Out of the strong comes something sweet." And in 3 days, they could not solve the riddle. On the 4th day, he said to Samson's wife, "Entice your husband, or we're going to burn down your house. Have you invited us here to impoverish?" Keep in mind, the linen garments were big bucks. They would have been struck down. And Samson's wife wept over him and said, "You don't love me. Why don't you tell me? You've put out a riddle and you've not told me what it is." And Samson says, "Are you kidding me?" Now, this is a great way to start the honeymoon. "Are you kidding me? I haven't even told my mom and dad. Why should I tell you?" Does that put her in first place? No. So he's already in trouble. And she wept before him the 7 days that their feast lasted. And on the 7th day, he finally told her, because she went on and on and on. "And you don't love me." We're going to see later on Delilah, she's going to say, "You mocked me and you told me a lie." Then she told the riddle to her people. And the men of the city said to him on the 7th day before the sun went down, "What is sweeter than honey and stronger than a lion?" And he said to them, again, if she's listened to this, she's thinking, "I know what he thinks about me. If you've not plowed with my heifer, you would not have found out my riddle." Now, ladies, how would you like to have your husband refer to you as a heifer? Would not go well. And the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him, and he went down to Ashkelon, theft. He went down to theft. He struck 30 men, and he thieved. He took their spoil and gave the garments to those who had told the riddle. In hot anger, he went back to his father's house. And Samson's wife was given to his companion, doesn't say friend, who had been his best man. Now, I know when I got married, my best man was my brother. I'm guessing when you got married, your best man was your best friend. But in this particular case, it was one of the 30 that were just dragged over, and one had to be a witness, and so he became his best man. Which brings us to chapter 15. I'm going to jump ahead to make a comment about chapter 16. When he goes through some of these battles, starting with the 30 garments, and we're going to move on to the jawbone, he talks about his revenge. By the time we get to chapter 16 and the pillars coming down in the temple, he asks the Lord to avenge himself. Keep in mind, the Bible says, revenge is mine, I will repay. Thus saith the Lord, not thus saith yours truly. After some days, at the time of wheat harvest, Samson went to visit his wife. He went back to the forbidden place, Timnah. And he said, I will go into my wife in the chamber. But her father would not allow. The father would forbid Timnah him to go in. And her father said, I really thought that you utterly hated her. So I gave her to your companion. Is not her younger sister more beautiful than she? Take her instead. And Samson said to them, this time I shall be innocent in regard to the Philistines when I do them harm. So Samson went and got 300 foxes and took torches. Now, this has always been a puzzle to me. How do you catch 300 foxes? Well, you can use humane traps and this and that. Okay, so where are you going to keep 300 foxes? And how are you going to find two of them to be able to tie their tails together? And how are you going to set 300 torches? I just can't imagine them all lined up like firecrackers and just go like that. I don't know how he did it, but he did it. And he turned them tail to tail and put a torch between each pair of tails. And when he had set fire to the torches, he let the foxes go into the standing grain and set fire to the stacked grain and the standing grain, as well as the olive orchards. Now, an olive tree can live to be over 1,000 years old, and it's got to be pretty old before it even starts to bear olives. And so he's destroying not just that year's harvest, but harvests to come from their olive orchards. He is really putting it to the Philistines. Then the Philistines said, who has done this? And they said, Samson, the son-in-law of the Timnite. Notice that even the Philistines recognized the marriage. They didn't say that guy that had a party for us. They didn't say that guy that did those 30 garments. They said the son-in-law of the Timnite, because he has taken away his wife. And the Philistines came up and burned her and her father with fire. The book of Proverbs says that if a man steals a loaf of bread, he needs to pay back and things will be okay. But if you steal somebody's wife, there's no bribe. There's nothing that's going to be accepted. And Samson said to them, if this is what you do, I swear I will be avenged on you, as opposed to what he's going to say when he takes down that temple. And he struck them hip and thigh. That doesn't mean that he just beat them in two places of the anatomy. That's simply a phrase that the Hebrews used to mean he gave them a hard whipping. And he struck them hip and thigh with a great blow, and he went down and stayed in the cleft of the rock of Edom, a place of birds. And so there's this rock, there's this perch, and he's up on top of this rock. And what's going to happen is the Philistines are really wanting to get him. And so, keeping in mind the Philistines rule over Israel, they get 3,000 men of the tribe of Judah. That rock happens to be in the real estate of Judah. And they get him to try to deliver Samson to them. So he goes and he hangs out at the rock of Edom. Ray Pritchard is a graduate of Dallas Theological Seminary. He heads up Keep Believing Ministries. This is what he says. That's what happens when you try to seek revenge in your life. When you try to seek revenge for wrongs done to you, you set in motion an unended cycle of violence. The only way to get off the cycle of violence is not to seek revenge in the first place. As long as you do, as long as you want to get even, you're going to go down, 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 and down And that, of course, is Samson's life verse. Then the Philistines came and encamped in Judah and made a raid on Lehi. It doesn't mean Allentown. It's this place called the Jawbone. And the men of Judah said, "Why have you come up against us?" And they said, "We have come up to bind Samson, to do to him as he had done to us." Then the 3,000 men of Judah went down to the cleft of the rock of Edom and said to Samson, "Do you not know that the Philistines are rulers over us? What then is this that you have done to us?" Sounds almost like the slaves when they said to Moses, Pharaoh said, "They've got too much time on their hands. We're going to put a heavier quota on them, and we're going to make them even harder." And at that time, the Hebrew said to Moses, "What are you doing to us?" And so can you imagine, he's sitting up there on this rock and he's now surrounded by 3,000 of his own countrymen, and they want to tie him up. And he said to them, "As they did to me, so I've done to them." So now we're going to take another look at a map. There's Zorah and there's Eshtaol. Keep in mind the distance is only 2 miles apart. He goes down to Timnah, which is only 5 miles from Zorah, and that's where he had his marriage. He goes down to Ashkelon, and that's where he got his garments. And if you look at the scale on the right, that's about a 20-mile hike. From there, he goes over to Lehi, which is in the land of Judah. He's going to go to Gaza, and that's where he meets up with the prostitute. From Gaza, he carries the city gates almost to Hebron, which is a place of fellowship. And then he ends up meeting Delilah in the valley of Sorek, the valley of the vineyards. And they said to him, "We have come down to bind you, that we may give you into the hands of the Philistines." And Samson said to them, "Swear to me that you will not attack me yourselves." Now keep in mind, Samson was strong, but he wasn't impervious to a sword or a spear piercing him. So he's saying, "If I let you guys get near me, promise you're not going to do me in." They said, "No, we'll only bind you and give you into their hands." Now, one of the 4 strikes against Samson when Delilah is dealing with is getting him bound. I don't think he left any Philistine survivors, because they would have gone back and said, "Don't fall for that binding stuff, because he can't be bound." So they bound him with 2 new ropes and brought him up from the rock. And when he came to Lehi, the Philistines came shouting to meet him. And when the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him, and the ropes that were on his arms became as flax that was caught fire, his bonds melted off his hands. And he found a fresh jawbone of a donkey. Samson didn't kill those Philistines. The Lord did. Samson had a jawbone. David had a slingshot. There are all kinds of different menial tools that have been used in the hands of people, but it's the Lord that gives those victories. And he found a fresh jawbone of a donkey and put out his hand and took it. And with it, he struck 1,000 men. So now, so far, the death toll is 1,000 plus 30. And then that bunch that said he beat them hip and thigh, if any of those died, they'll be on top of that as well. What we're going to see when we get to chapter 16 is the Bible says that he killed more during his death than he did during his life. So how many did he kill? We're going to read that there were 3,000 on the roof of the temple. We don't know how many were in the temple. So it could be approaching 4,000, 5,000, 6,000. But when the temple came down, he took out the upper echelon. It would be like seeing the Capitol collapse while a president's giving the State of the Union address. The military is there, the president's there, the judges are there, both houses of Congress are there, a bunch of influential visitors are there. So just if you wanted to picture that temple, picture the U.S. Capitol, where there are people up on the galleries and there are people down below. And he found a fresh jawbone of a donkey and put out his hand and took it. And with it, he struck 1,000 men. And Samson said, with the jawbone of a donkey, heaps upon heaps, with the jawbone of a donkey, have I struck down 1,000 men. And as soon as he had finished speaking, he threw away the jawbone out of his hand, and that place was called the Hill of the Jawbone. Now, it doesn't say that the real estate had a hill in it, or if there was just a pile of Philistines and he threw the jawbone on top of the pile. Either way, the name stuck. Instead of it was Lehi, it became Ramoth Lehi, the Hill of the Jawbone. And he was very thirsty, and he called upon the Lord and said, "You have granted this great salvation by the hand of your servant, and shall I now die of thirst and fall into the hands of the uncircumcised?" And God split open the hollow place that is at Lehi, and water came out from it. Sounds like Moses speaking and then striking to the rock. And when he drank, his spirit returned and he revived. Therefore, the name of it was called the Spring of Him Who Called. And it's there up until the time of this writing. And he judged Israel in the days of the Philistines 20 years. We don't know what that means. We know what Deborah's judgment was like. The Bible says that people came to her and she made some judgments. The Philistines are still ruling over them. So what was Samson doing? The Bible doesn't tell us. That takes us to chapter 16. I'm going to start chapter 16, but we're not going to be able to finish it. But I want to, in the introduction, give you some things to think about. Samson went to Gaza. The word Gaza means fortified. And the reason that's important is he's going to take that gate and the bars that were attached to it, means the hinges and everything else, and he's going to carry that gate 40 miles. Now, it's not like me trying to take, say, an exterior 36-inch door. I could barely lift it. I can lift it, but I can put it into place. This was a fortified city, and the gate was how they went in and out with their wagons to feed the people and everything else. It was huge. And it wasn't like a 6-panel hollow door. It was real wood. And to hold that real wood, you need real hinges. I don't know if I could even lift a hinge, let alone the whole door plus the accessories. And Samson went to Gaza, and there he saw once again his fatal flaw. He saw his lust of his eyes, and he went into her. What he was doing, go down to Gaza in the first place, the Bible doesn't tell us. Did he go down there for the intent of finding that woman? We don't know. The Gazites were told, Samson has come here. And they surrounded the place and set an ambush for him all night at the gate of the city. And they kept quiet all night, saying, "Let us wait till the light of the morning, then we will kill him." Now, just like a Major League Baseball game, they must have had all kinds of lights on the stadium because he looks like he's carrying those doors in broad daylight. But he wasn't. He took those doors at midnight. Samson lay till midnight, and at midnight he arose and took hold of the doors of the gate of the city and the 2 posts, and he pulled them up, bar and all, and put them on his shoulders, and he carried them to the top of the hill that is in front of Hebron. Hebron means fellowship. If you wanted to study Hebron, there are 2 sagas that I would draw your attention to. This is one, and the other one is the case of Abner. Abner killed Joab's kid brother by accident. The kid brother, his name escapes me, chasing Abner. He was known for him being a true track star. And Abner kept saying, "Look, I don't have an argument with me. Just go home. Just go home." And he's coming closer and closer. And Abner takes the butt end of his spear to hold him off. And that guy was running so fast that that spear went between the ribs and killed him. Abner goes to Hebron, a place of fellowship, a city of refuge. There were 6 cities of refuge that if you killed somebody by accident, you can go there. If you stay in the city, you it's a sanctuary city until the high priest dies. Well, Joab knows this, and Joab is waiting at the gate. And before Abner goes in, Joab says, "Come on over here," and kills him. And in the funeral, David said that Abner was a prince who died like a fool.